I used to love those kinds of nights, the ones where the city felt like it was dressed up just for us. That evening at the Riverside Arts Center in Portland was no exception. The gala was the highlight of the local charity calendar, a place where gallery curators mingled with startup execs and neighborhood volunteers drank wine like it was their job. Brooke had been buzzing about it for weeks. She'd even gone shopping for a new dress, something polished but soft. In her words, it was ivory silk, elegant, understated, with a neckline that made me feel like the luckiest guy in the room. We'd barely walked in before Brooke was whisked away into a flurry of conversation. She always fit in effortlessly. Every room she entered seemed to bend around her. And I was happy to orbit that gravity. At least I had been. Somewhere between the silent auction for a garden sculpture and the third pour of Willamette Valley Pinot, I noticed her talking to Tyler. Tyler was our neighbor, lived 3 townhouses down. Early 40s, lean, always in jogging gear or some kind of Henley with the sleeves pushed up like he'd just come from doing something rugged. I didn't know much about him, other than he volunteered for local projects now and then, including the same revitalization effort Brooke had joined. I'd heard his name enough in passing. Tyler had a good idea for signage. Tyler brought muffins to the cleanup crew. Tyler knows someone who prints flyers for cheap. I didn't think anything of it at first. He was part of her community efforts. He was around. No big deal. But that night, watching them from across the room, I felt something twist in my gut. Not jealousy. Not exactly. Just awareness. They were dancing, not inappropriately technically, but it was the kind of closeness that made people glance once, then look again. His hand lingered a little too long on the small of her back. Her laughter came too easily. The space between them wasn't space anymore. They looked like 2 people who'd shared something recently, something private. I tried not to make a thing of it. After all, it was a gala. Everyone was drinking. Everyone was loose. Maybe I was reading too much into it. I told myself that for about 10 minutes until they both disappeared. They slipped away together through one of the staff corridors that looped behind the main gallery space. I only caught a glimpse. Brooke's dress vanishing around the corner, Tyler's hand brushing her arm as they exited. I watched the hallway for a while, pretending to admire some abstract sculpture made of rusted bicycle parts. I waited. I checked my phone. I waited longer. 14 minutes. That's how long they were gone. When they returned, it wasn't dramatic. No lipstick smears on the mouth, no mussed hair or red cheeks. But something was off. Tyler's shirt cuff was unbuttoned and hanging loose. Brooke's left strap had slipped down her shoulder, like gravity had become stronger in her absence. There was a subtle sheen to her lip gloss, too perfect to be freshly reapplied, and a pinkish smudge, barely noticeable, on the collar of Tyler's shirt. I couldn't breathe for a second. My mind didn't scream. It just quieted, like someone turned the volume down on the world. They re-entered the crowd as if nothing had happened, and Brooke floated right up to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "There you are," she said, slipping her arm around my waist. "I was looking for you." I almost asked her where she'd gone. Almost. But something told me I wouldn't like the answer, or the lie that would come instead. She leaned in, kissed my cheek lightly. I caught the scent of her perfume. Something new, not the citrus rose one she used to wear. This one was deeper, muskier. I didn't ask about that either. Instead, I nodded toward the auction table. "Your friend Tyler's got a strong bidding game. He's going after that coastal watercolor." She laughed, a little too loud, and brushed her fingers through her hair. "Oh, you know Tyler. He gets competitive about weird things." I let that sit. Then I said, careful not to sound too curious, "You two seemed like you were having a good time earlier." She blinked, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then the smile returned, glossier this time. "He's just fun." I was filling him in on the progress with the mural committee. "You'd get bored with it." "Probably," I said. "Still, you were gone for a while." She shrugged. "I had to grab something from the supply area. We were checking on the installation schedule for the south wall. Tyler wanted to show me something in the storage area. You know how it is." I did not know how it was. I let her talk. She was good at it, at making casual lies sound like background noise. She changed the subject quickly, pointing out the mini quiches she wanted to steal off a server's tray, complaining about the shoes she shouldn't have worn. But I wasn't hearing her anymore. Later that night, as we walked out under the riverfront lights, I noticed she was holding a wine glass she must have swiped from the bar. It still had her lip print on the rim. I carried it to the car without thinking. Just set it in the cup holder beside me. It wasn't until the next morning that I found myself staring at it again, at the smudge of pink and the half-finished contents. I dropped her off at home and circled back to the venue, needing closure I couldn't define. That's when I saw it. Another glass, nearly identical, resting near the staff entrance by the dumpsters. Same wine. Same pink lipstick. Same faint, cherry-like scent I now recognized as her new go-to gloss. I stood there, staring at it. I didn't pick it up. I didn't need to. Back at home, I asked again, "You and Tyler were gone for a bit. What did you end up doing back there?" She didn't flinch. She was in the kitchen, eating cold pasta straight from the container. "Oh, he was just rambling about an art exhibit he wants to curate. Super boring. I told him to pitch it to the board. You know how people get when they have too much wine and think they're brilliant." That time, she didn't even blink. "Nothing weird." I pressed, keeping my voice even. She laughed. "What, like Scandal in the broom closet? Come on, Adam. You're being dramatic." I nodded. She tilted the container to drink the last bit of vinaigrette. Then she smiled. "You trust me, right?" I didn't answer, and she didn't wait for one. Looking back, it's hard not to feel stupid. Not just because I missed the signs, but because I saw them. I saw every single one. I just didn't want to believe what they meant. There's this thing that happens when you love someone. You build a narrative around them, who they are, how they behave, what they'd never do. And every time something contradicts that, your brain bends over backward to keep the story intact. It's not blindness. It's more like willful forgetting, selective silence. You bury the discomfort before it becomes a threat. But after that night at the gala, the forgetting stopped working. Things that once seemed harmless started to sharpen into focus. Little details, mostly. The kind you don't think twice about until they stack up and start to lean. Like her calendar. Brooke used to leave it open on the kitchen tablet, color-coded blocks of her day, work, meetings, errands, social events. I'd glance at it out of habit while drinking coffee or waiting for toast. But lately, the screen was always dark. Locked, turned face down. When I asked her once if she was still meeting with the mural committee that Thursday, she hesitated, just for a moment, before saying they'd pushed it. Her tone was off, not quite casual. It sat wrong in my gut. Then there were the new passwords. She changed the PIN on her phone, the password on her laptop, and the code to the shared Dropbox folder we used to keep our house docs. She claimed it was for security after a coworker got phished. But I noticed she didn't tell me the new ones. And when I asked, she said, "Oh, I'll give them to you later. I'm just rushing right now." She never did. Her wardrobe shifted too. At first, I didn't think much of it. Brooke had always been stylish. But her choices took on a different tone. More sheer, more tight, more skin. When I joked once, "Who's the lucky audience for this presentation?" she gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "The board, obviously, and potential donors. Gotta look confident, right?" But I noticed she only wore those outfits on days when she claimed to be prepping with the team. Days that never seemed to show up on the foundation's public event schedule. Her perfume changed, too. She used to wear something soft and airy, peach blossom, I think. Now it was heavier, muskier, the kind of scent that lingered in a room after she left. Once, after one of her late nights, I caught a faint hint of cologne clinging to the fibers of her scarf. Not mine. Not anything I'd ever worn. When I mentioned it offhand, she sniffed the scarf herself, then shrugged. Could be from the Lyft driver. They always wear that strong stuff. And that was another thing, the rideshares. She started taking more of them. She said she didn't want to deal with parking downtown, especially during evening meetings or late work events. Fair enough. But one night, she mentioned her car was at the mechanic. I said I could drive her. She declined. said she was already covered. I checked the garage the next morning. Her car was there, parked perfectly right where it always was. There were cash withdrawals, too small at first, then larger. I'd see them on our shared account. $60 here, $100 there. She said it was for grabbing lunch with the team or tipping the cleaning staff during planning week. But it became a pattern. Random amounts at odd hours. Once I asked her directly, and she looked annoyed. Said, "Why are you checking my spending, Adam? I don't check yours." She wasn't wrong. But that wasn't the point. Even the way she moved through the house changed. She used to walk in the door and immediately find me, kiss my cheek, tell me some odd little story about her day. Now she walked straight to the shower. No hello. No eye contact. Just long day. I need to rinse off. And the door would close behind her. Once, I knocked and said, "Want me to join you?" She laughed. Too quickly, too loud. "God, no. I'm disgusting right now. Trust me, you don't want any part of this." Another time, I asked if she wanted to watch a movie after she got out. She said, "Maybe, but I've got work to prep. Those reports won't read themselves." I offered to help. She smiled and said, "You wouldn't understand this part. It's all committee jargon." Funny thing is, I'd read some of her reports before. They weren't that complicated. Then there was the repetition. I didn't catch it at first, but she started recycling phrases. If I asked where she'd been, her answers felt rehearsed, like they'd been used before. "Oh, we were just coordinating logistics for the donor pitch. Had to stop by the gallery for layout checks. Tyler and I are sorting out mural deadlines." Same words, same cadence, week after week. It was like listening to a loop. Even the energy in her texts changed. She used to pepper me with little updates. Photos of her lunch, **TS of tweets she thought were funny, weird observations from the street. But now, radio silence. Hours between replies. Dry responses. No emojis. No warmth. If I sent something funny, I'd get LOL or "that's cute" with a period at the end. The kind of tone that doesn't want to keep talking. One night, around 11 p.m., I got a message that read, "Working late. Don't wait up." No punctuation. No kiss emoji. Just those 5 words. And nothing else until the next morning. I told myself it was just stress. Maybe she was burnt out. Maybe the foundation was piling too much on her. I even brought up the idea of taking a weekend trip. Just the two of us. She smiled, tight-lipped, and said, "Let's pencil something in after next quarter." Next quarter. She used to jump at weekend getaways. Now she talked like a CEO dodging vacation time. I started watching her more closely, not in a paranoid way. At least I didn't think it was. I just paid attention. I noticed how she flinched when her phone buzzed and I was nearby. How she'd step out to take calls, even during dinner. How she kept her laptop angled away from me when she worked on the couch. She used to lean into me while she typed. Now there was always a throw pillow between us. One afternoon, she left her iPad on the kitchen counter. It was locked, of course, but a banner popped up at the top. A notification from a shared photo album titled "The Loft Weekends." The preview said, "New upload. Saturday, 2:43 p.m. Tyler, edit approved." I tapped the screen, but it asked for a passcode. I stood there, staring at it until the screen dimmed again. That night, she said she was staying late to help prep an installation. I nodded. She said, "Tyler's bringing coffee. He's basically my unpaid assistant at this point." I laughed politely. She laughed back. But I noticed she didn't ask what my plans were. Didn't ask if I wanted her to bring anything back. Didn't even kiss me goodbye. Just grabbed her bag and left. And I watched her go, heart pounding. A thought rising I didn't want to say out loud yet. Even in my own head. What if this isn't just stress? What if she's not slipping away accidentally? What if she's already gone? It was a Wednesday, midweek. Nothing special about it. Brooke had left early that morning. Said she needed to prep for a midday site visit near Alberta Street. "Tyler's driving," she'd added. Like that detail would somehow ease the fact she'd be gone all day. I nodded, pretended not to care, and went about my usual routine. But something about the way she said it stuck in my chest. Not the words themselves, just how casual they were. Too smooth, practiced. So when the doorbell notification pinged on my phone around 12:17 p.m., I checked it, half out of boredom. It was her. The app showed the familiar image of our front porch, autumn leaves swirling across the steps. And there she was, standing on the curb, leaning into the open window of a silver sedan. Tyler's car. I recognized the roof rack and the dent near the rear wheel well. She was dressed differently than she had been when she left the house. No blazer, no tote, just a low-cut wine-colored top I hadn't seen before and a black pleated skirt she used to wear on nights out, before those stopped happening. But it wasn't the outfit that made my stomach clench. It was the kiss. Not a peck, not a cheek graze, not friendly. She leaned in slow, tilted her head, closed her eyes. It lasted longer than it should have. Maybe 3 or 4 seconds. But it felt like time cracked open and spilled into me. Her hand was resting on his. The camera caught it, her fingers curled over his knuckles on the steering wheel like it was something she did often. Familiar. Practiced. Then she stepped back, smoothed her hair, adjusted her strap, and walked up the steps. I watched it again, and again. By the 4th replay, I realized I wasn't breathing. The audio feed was too muffled to hear their voices, but it didn't matter. The visuals told the whole story. She wasn't confused. She wasn't caught up in a moment. She was comfortable, in control. She'd kissed him in broad daylight on our street, like it wasn't even a risk, like it had happened before. And when she walked inside, I heard her call out, "Hey babe, my meeting got canceled. Thought I'd grab lunch at home. You want anything?" I didn't answer right away, just stared at my phone, at her hand on his, at the way she smiled as she walked away from his car. She repeated the question, louder this time. I cleared my throat, still sitting at the dining room table. "No, I'm good," I managed. She appeared in the doorway moments later, peeling off her jacket. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, "just working through some logistics. Boring stuff." She nodded and disappeared into the kitchen, opened the fridge, hummed some song under her breath, poured a glass of kombucha like it was just another normal afternoon. I forced myself to act normal, too, to finish out the day like I hadn't just watched my marriage shift from suspicion into something undeniable. Later that night, when she went upstairs to shower again, I sat on the couch and opened the gala footage on my laptop. I hadn't gone looking for it until then. I didn't want to be that guy, scrolling obsessively, dissecting gestures, decoding eye contact. But I couldn't shake the image of her with Tyler. I needed to know what else I'd missed. The foundation had posted clips from the event, mostly B-roll stuff for their social channels. I scrolled through until I found the uncut livestream archive. 2.5 hours of footage, grainy and wide-angled, from a high perch above the stage and crowd. I clicked through in 10-minute jumps, watched the guests mill about. Waiters drifted past with trays. Speeches, applause, laughter. Brooke in her ivory dress, talking to a cluster of volunteers. And then there it was. Tyler stepped into frame. He said something to her. She smiled, really smiled, brighter than I'd seen in months. He took her hand, led her toward the edge of the room. They danced. Not the kind of dancing you'd see between two coworkers at a fundraiser. This was slow, close. She rested her head against his chest at one point. His hand dipped a little too low on her back. They swayed in rhythm like they had a song only they could hear. And then, from another camera angle, one I hadn't seen before, they moved behind the lighting rig, into the shadows, just out of the crowd's sight. She looked up at him, said something. He touched her cheek. And then they kissed. I paused the footage. Right there, frozen between light and shadow, was the confirmation I hadn't been ready to find. The soft grip of her fingers on his jacket. The way he held the back of her neck. Their bodies pressed so close it was hard to tell where one ended and the other began. The background was blurred, but their faces weren't. I leaned back in my chair, breath shallow, heart thudding in my ears. It wasn't just a theory anymore. It wasn't intuition or paranoia or half-truths. It was proof. It was betrayal in motion, captured by accident, preserved by the very organization she claimed to serve. I sat there for a long time after that, staring at the screen, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the other room. She came downstairs later in sweatpants and asked if I wanted to watch something. I said I was tired. She kissed the top of my head and said, "Don't work too hard." I said nothing. She went back upstairs. I waited until I heard the door click shut before opening the doorbell footage again. Watched the curb scene, the kiss, the hand. Then I closed the app. I wasn't tired. I wasn't working. I was watching the story I believed in collapse pixel by pixel. Once the shock wore off, and it did eventually, like anesthesia fading after surgery, something else took its place. Not rage, not even heartbreak, just a cold, precise stillness. Like my body had shifted into a different mode, the part of me that used to solve problems at work when the margins didn't add up. It's strange how grief can turn into calculation when you finally stop begging for an explanation that will never come. I stopped asking questions, and I started tracking answers. The first thing I did was upgrade the settings on our smart doorbell. I enabled motion alerts for every hour, not just when someone rang. I saved the cloud backup locally with timestamps. I created a folder on my personal drive called Maintenance Logs, but it was anything but routine. Next, I pulled up our rideshare history. We had a shared account, meant to streamline receipts back when Brooke used to file expenses for her old job. She hadn't bothered to switch back to a private one. I'm sure she didn't think I'd ever check. The logs were damning. Night after night, rides to unfamiliar addresses. Some near warehouse lofts, others in gentrifying districts filled with boutique wine bars and late-night bakeries. She never once mentioned these places. The drop-off times often didn't match her claimed team dinners. Some of the return rides were after midnight, even on weeknights. I cross-referenced the rides with our bank statements. Most of the purchases were in cash, which explained the withdrawals I'd noticed. But now I had context. Lounge names, bar tabs, parking garages that charged by the hour. I downloaded the full transaction history, color-coded it by date, and started building a timeline. Then came the devices. Brooke had a laptop she used for foundation work, one she rarely let me touch anymore, claiming it had sensitive donor info. But we'd set it up together years ago, back when we still trusted each other, and I remembered the admin login. She had never changed it. When she left the laptop open one morning before a weekend meeting, I mirrored the contents to an external drive. It took less than 10 minutes. The machine hummed, unaware of the betrayal it was exposing. I didn't open the folders right away. Not yet. I wanted to prepare myself. Instead, I started small. I checked the Photos app. There were albums, some named innocently, others less so. One was called Studio Saturdays. Inside were dozens of pictures. Candid sh*ts in a space I didn't recognize. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, a record player in the corner. Brooke, barefoot, laughing in a deep green wrap dress. Tyler in the background of many of them, holding a wine glass, leaning against the doorframe. Some sh*ts were angled like selfies, but taken with a timer. Another album was simply called Oregon Light. It was full of images from Hood River, Astoria, Silverton. I hadn't gone on any of those trips. There were receipts, too. PDFs of Airbnb confirmations, QR codes for valet parking. Some documents were labeled Planning Weekend or Strategy Retreat. I cross-checked the dates. Every single one matched a weekend she told me she was recharging alone or doing board development. They were anything but. Her browser history filled in the rest. Speakeasy pop-ups, event calendars for rooftop tastings, even a booking for a float tank session. For two. In a folder buried inside another, labeled Q1 2023 Budget Notes, I found exported message threads from a chat app I'd never seen before. Not iMessage. Not WhatsApp. Something encrypted. I opened the text file and read. Tyler, everything set for Saturday? Brooke. Yep. He thinks I'm at the mural seminar. I'll meet you at the lot at 4. Tyler, still want Ty after? Or should we just crash at the loft? Crash at the loft. They had a rhythm. Dozens of messages, each one precise. Pickup times. Traffic tips. Excuses to use. One even read, repeat last week's story if he asks. Worked before. Worked before. I highlighted that message and just stared at it. It wasn't a slip-up. It was rehearsal. They weren't scrambling to hide. They were methodical. They'd built a language, pattern. So I decided to build my own. I created a master log, video captures, timestamped rideshares, bank activity, GPS location metadata from synced devices. I used my IT background to run a lightweight tracking script on her old tablet, which auto-synced to our cloud account. It hadn't been wiped. She probably forgot it was still linked. It fed me quiet data, screen times, location pings, app usage. One alert hit while she claimed to be at a gallery mixer. The tablet showed her logged into the encrypted app for 40 straight minutes. Same period her text replies to me were non-existent. That night, she came home exhausted. Fell asleep on the couch in full makeup. I didn't wake her. I added it to the log. I began saving everything in a hidden directory, syncing to encrypted cloud storage with two-factor authentication routed to a secondary number I kept off-grid. I printed physical copies of the most critical pieces, kiss stills from the porch, the gala footage, the chat logs, and stored them in a lockbox at a storage unit registered under my name only. Just in case. Paranoia? Maybe. But when you realize the person you trusted most has an entirely separate life and has rehearsed how to lie to your face, you start preparing for worst-case scenarios. I booked a legal consult. Didn't tell her. Didn't make a scene. Just showed the attorney everything, organized, logged, timestamped. I thought I'd get a nod and a dry thank you. Instead, he sat back and said, "This isn't suspicion. This is proof. You've built an airtight case." His exact words. I asked him what came next. He outlined the path, documentation, financial partition, digital safeguards. Quiet moves first. Confrontation last. He said, "When someone creates a double life, they expect emotion, chaos. If you give them precision, they panic." So that became my approach. Not revenge. Not anger. Just precision. I began rewiring our financial map. Opened a private checking account. Routed my paychecks. Canceled the autopayments linked to our shared cards, insurance, gym, streaming services. She didn't notice. Or maybe she thought the glitches were system errors. I also called the home security provider and restricted remote access. Changed the backup passcodes. She hadn't updated her permissions in months. I changed mine. Then I sat back and waited for her next move. Because whatever she thought this was, a game, a secret escape, a harmless connection, I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew, and soon so would she. There's a moment when suspicion turns into certainty, and then certainty into something else entirely, something colder. I thought I'd already hit that point after the footage, after the messages, after the lies stacked up like bricks between us. But I was wrong. I'd only scratched the surface. The truth wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. It started with a folder labeled, innocuously enough, Q2 Retreat Prep. It was buried inside another subfolder titled Grant Logistics 2024. I almost skipped it, thinking it was leftover work material. But something about the update date caught my eye. It was recent, too recent. Brooke hadn't mentioned any upcoming retreats. Inside were files. Dozens of them. And not the kind you put together for a 2-day seminar. There were logo mock-ups, stylized, speakeasy-inspired fonts overlaying moody photos of liquor bottles and velvet booths. One logo had their initials embedded into the design. B&T, woven into the shadow of a wine glass. The folder also included a draft of an LLC agreement. Dated. Signed by Brooke. The business name? The Still Room. An address in Hood River was listed under the registration notes, and there was a digital receipt for a virtual business number registered to a second phone line. One I had never seen or heard ring in the house. There were spreadsheets, too. Not budget summaries, investment projections, equipment lists, supplier quotes, a liquor license application half-filled. I scanned through it in stunned silence. This wasn't just a fling. This wasn't just late-night texts and weekend lofts. This was a plan. Parallel life. My wife had gone beyond secrecy. She'd started building something with him. Something real. Something structured. There were sample menus, locally sourced cocktails, descriptions of a farm-to-glass tasting room experience, notes about live acoustic weekends, and soft launch invite-only pre-events. Every line item in that file matched dates and expenses I had already logged. The cash withdrawals, the Airbnb stays, the Thursday afternoon deliveries she said were for the mural committee. I went back to the rideshare log and cross-checked the drop-offs. Every visit to Hood River fell within 2 days of an off-site she mentioned in passing. She'd used a mix of personal rides and rented cars. One booking stood out, a weekender from a luxury auto share service. She'd driven to what she told me was a wellness spa. The receipt said otherwise. Delivery to 2181 Oak Street, Hood River, Oregon. The same address listed as the proposed location for the still room. I opened the map. It was a former photography studio, vacant since 2019, available for lease. And just like that, I saw it clearly, not just the affair, not just the infidelity, but the infrastructure of it. The blueprint, the rehearsed future. They weren't sneaking around anymore. They were building something, together. I scrolled through the LLC template. It had placeholders for investor contacts, legal agreements, split ownership. Her name appeared as managing partner. Tyler's was listed under creative director. Creative director. I almost laughed. The same guy who used to ask if our HOA allowed patio fire pits was now planning cocktail flights and branding strategy. I opened the Notes app sync from her tablet next. She'd left it signed in. I hadn't noticed it before, but buried inside was a list titled Things to Phase Out. It was bullet-pointed. Cancel gym membership. Wait 30 days. Talk to Adam Ree. Refinancing timing. Move insurance to new address after Jan. Tyler. Follow-up Ree. Lease deposit. Confirm split 70 of 30. At the bottom, one entry was marked with an asterisk. Storage unit. Move Phase 1 items discreetly. I closed the file. Phase 1. I didn't want to know what that meant, but I could guess. She'd been preparing to leave. Not in a moment of passion, not out of guilt, but slowly, structurally, with exits and alibis and financial independence. I was never meant to know. I was just supposed to stay oblivious long enough for her to slip out clean. She didn't just betray me emotionally. She planned around me, planned through me, and the most damning detail? She wasn't waiting for the fallout. She was moving ahead regardless. There was a PDF labeled Soft Launch Guest List. I opened it. I recognized names. Not friends. Not family. People from our neighborhood. Our HOA president. A couple from our local wine club. A real estate agent we'd both used years ago. She had invited them. They knew. Or at least they'd been brought in early. I didn't know if they understood the whole story. Probably not. But the fact that she had pulled our shared connections into her new chapter while I was still living in the last one, that broke something in me I didn't know could still be hurt. She had taken pieces of our life, my life, and repurposed them like furniture she'd already moved into another house. I scrolled back through her text backups and found messages that added salt to the wound. Brooke to Tyler. He still thinks I'm taking meetings with donors. I'm exhausted pretending. Tyler, we're almost there. Let's just get through launch and then reset. Reset. That word stayed with me. They weren't escaping anything. They were reinventing themselves. Together. As partners. Brooke and I used to dream about opening a business once. A little bookstore cafe. She liked the idea of curated shelves and hand-poured coffee. We'd stayed up late, sketching floor plans on napkins, debating music playlists, brainstorming names. I never imagined she'd do it with someone else. With the man who sat across from us at HOA meetings. The man who once borrowed our ladder to clean his gutters. I sat there, staring at the screen, and realized I was no longer dealing with betrayal. This was exile. A quiet replacement. A carefully staged erasure. She was building a future where I didn't exist. And worse, where I was never supposed to. So I made a decision. If she was already writing me out of the story, I'd give her exactly what she wanted. I'd disappear from the parts she hadn't planned for yet. But not quietly. Not before I finished setting the stage for the final act. Not before she realized the audience had changed. Not before she saw that I was no longer guessing. I was documenting. And I was done being erased. I gathered every piece of evidence, videos, receipts, chats, and built a digital archive with timestamps and off-site backups. Quietly, I secured my finances, opened a private account, canceled joint payments, and changed all passwords. A lawyer reviewed everything. It wasn't suspicion anymore. It was fact. The plan was clear now. No arguments. No warning. Just precision. At the next HOA and charity board meeting, I calmly presented a conflict of interest report with dates, names, and financial overlaps. At the same time, my attorney filed separation papers and froze joint assets. Brooke tried to act confused, but Tyler's expression gave it away. No anger, no accusations, just facts. That's what truly stunned them. The quiet clarity. The way I walked out with everything. And said nothing.